A lot of the things I do are mistakes. Like it's just that I just kind of like, okay, well, I don't know how to do this. How do I do this? And I do it and I make mistakes and I find out how to not do it, right? And so to your question, it's all of the above. It's all of the above, and everybody's going to have a little bit of a different path to that. You just have to determine what's right for you at this time of your life.
Welcome back to the Have a Map podcast from Dim Events, where we talk all things career. I'm your host, Brett Corona, broadcast journalism intern with Dim Events. And we also have our co-host here. Karina, you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, so I'm Karina Corral, currently a videography intern here at Dim Events. I am a senior attending the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, studying film production and hopefully getting more focusing on also editing.
And for today, we have our guest, Thang Ho, here to talk about the film industry and everything all about that. So you want to introduce yourself? Give us a little bit of background on who you are.
Sure. Yeah. My name is Thang. I am a director producer. I currently reside in Atlanta, Georgia. I own a production company here. We do commercials and music video as far as the company goes, and we obviously make narratives and short films on the side. We actually just had a project that screened at Tribeca Film Festival yesterday, 2 days ago. So I'm from Vietnam myself, and that's kind of like the brief breakdown of me, I guess.
How or when did you know exactly that the film industry was something for you?
I knew that the film, I guess is never like the answer to that question is that it's a progress, right? Like it's never a moment that you find out that it's something for you. I guess like if there was a moment, it would have been when about four years ago is when I think when I made my first short film, and I fell in love with the process of collaboration because I started out as a photographer before that, and but something about filmmaking is very different regarding to the level of contribution and collaboration in it that feels so much bigger than yourself. That's kind of and the pressure of it, and the being on set and all the elements of what is included in the filmmaking process kind of put me into the track that I said that this is exactly what I want to do. And so it kind of started from there. And then after that, it just continuously seeking education, figuring out different things, network, and then the rest is kind of history.
Let's talk a little bit about your short film that you made 4 years ago. What was the subject of it? What, I guess, inspired you from the get-go?
Well, to tell the truth, at the time, so I'm from Vietnam, so I'm an international. At the time, I was an international student. I was actually studying business in Boston at the time, and so in the time that I was a business student, I was doing freelance photography and whatnot. And then so one thing led to another. I started, merging that into doing videography. I started doing little music videos then and there, a little dance video, because I was actually in a dance crew when I was in college. And then I realized that I can't dance to save my life. So I kind of became their kind of photo and video guy. And so that naturally merged me towards doing that. So post graduation, I was freelancing doing videography and photography. And so at the time, my visa was actually expiring, because after you graduate college as an international student, you have 1 year of work authorization. And so as my time was running out, I'm like, okay, I'm at this very transitional stage of my life where I have, a business degree, and but I'm doing videography and photography, which is kind of sort of related, but not really. That was kind of the first time in my life where I answered the question of what do you want to do? I finished my undergrad and with a degree, and I'm doing something completely different. So that was at the time where I have to answer my question. Okay, like, do I take my degree, go back home, and work with my dad or things like that, or am I going to take a swing at this career? So at the time, I wanted to apply. I started to like, video making. It was very enjoyable for me, but I didn't know. I took all of the work that I had at the time, which was primarily music videos and dance videos and whatnot, and applied to a school in Boston called Emerson College, and I got rejected essentially. And then that obviously pissed me off, and so I kind of like, okay, well, clearly my work is not strong enough. So I basically called all my friends at the time to be like, okay, let's make a film. And so I kind of like go gung ho. I knew nothing about filmmaking at the time, really, other than like YouTube videos and whatnot. So I sat down with my friend Junior. His name is Junior Cias. He was he's a dancer actor. So he was like in the same dance crew with me. He was an actor as well. So he kind of shared with me a story of what it's like to be like, a Black actor in a theater environment in Boston at the time. And so we kind of took that experience and gave it to our friend Ray Binstock, who's the writer, playwright in New York at the time. And she basically put the script together. And then me and my friend Joe Brotman, who was like my very close friends at the time, we kind of like shot Liz and kind of like learn and kind of figure it out, doing everything pre DIY and get a team together. And I was doing improv at the time. So all of the actors kind of came from like the people that I met in improv, and then Junior obviously starred in as the role of that. So that's the film that I made. That was my first film. We made that, and then I submitted it to a master's degree for film in Atlanta at SCAD.
Sounds like you had a really like strong creative community around you in Boston. Did you like think that was like way to your advantage, especially with your dance crew? Do you think like most of the collaboration of that environment really helped you and like steered you towards the filmmaking?
Yeah, 100%. I think we Boston is not actually a huge like creative city. The creative community in Boston is actually very far in between. But what it had is a lot of people who are like studying things to satisfy their kind of parents and slash safe, like the safe choice of a degree. So everybody kind of wants to do like different things at the time. So I happened to came across a lot of those people, and like I said, my friend Junior, he's a very talented dancer. He actually danced with on a lot of like concerts with like artists around the country and whatnot. So at the time we met, we honestly connected through just talking about dating and stuff like that. And so he really helped like connected me with a lot of other dancers in the city, and just kind of putting yourself out there and make yourself like known in terms of what you do. And doing photography at the time helped me connect with a lot of people, and I think that kind of scratched that itch. And like the general philosophy, I suppose, is do what you hate, and you spend every minute of what you hate thinking about what you want to do. So it's kind of like, all of those people at the time were not perfectly enjoying their life. So a lot of times they would, want to do something else. So, we had a pretty supportive community there. So it definitely helps me. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's like really interesting to hear about, because honestly, like my first 2.5 years at college, like I was actually studying like civil engineering, and that was not going well at all.
Yeah.
Like I was not enjoying it. Like I was like, I can't focus in these maths and like science classes. Like I was looking at these physics equations, like I don't even know what's going on. So then like I had like the ultimatum, like I either had to like change my major or like, just leave school. So once I was like looking at my other options, like when I came across like the media and cinema studies like school, like it definitely caught my interest, because I feel like movies like, and shows, like that was definitely something I was into. So like once I really got into it, like that's when I started like really enjoying the classes and like working on student projects, of course pre-COVID. But yeah, it was like definitely exciting. So like for me, I'm really starting to look like at options for working. And since I live here in Illinois, you know, like sometimes you think like, oh, maybe LA or like New York is the only option. Like, do you think you have to go to those specific places to really get into the film industry, or like what would your advice be to those who might think those are their only options?
Yeah, that's a great question, because what I'll say, the answer is, do you need to be somewhere to make it into the film industry? The answer is no. Like, there are ways for you to figure it out. You know, I've met filmmakers that's from Austin, that's from Boston. There's a pool and there's a way to do things anywhere. Like, you know, it's the same question that people ask: do you need to go to film school to make it into the film industry? Right? I think it's a case-to-case basis. Like, we just watched, like, Bo, I don't know if you guys like are a fan of Bo Burnham, but he just filmed a whole entire Netflix thing in his freaking bedroom in the middle of a pandemic, that he did everything by himself, right? Obviously he was already a well-made, you know, name, so obviously it blew it up, but that's just an example that you can figure out a way to do it. But those examples are exception to the rule, right? Like, and you can always be an exception to the rule. Like, there's nothing that tells you that you can't. But as far and the second answer to that question is, it also depends on what type of, because the film industry and the movie industry in general is very big. You have like you have a lot of different segments of what that means, right? Like, you have the film industry, like Hollywood, indie. Like, in filmmaking, you have the indie, you know, section where you make a lot of indie movies, and so that's a different area where, you know, you being in different areas, and that is reflective in, you know, what type of budget you're working with, and what type of people that you're working with. You can probably work above the line in different areas that you go to. But when you move it towards, like, you know, the Hollywood section, when you want to make it into Hollywood, then really, if you want to work above the line, which is like, you know, directing a lead in these different productions, yeah, then LA and New York is the place to be, because or writers, right? Like, because there are very little amount of writers rooms available. I live in Atlanta, which is a very heavy production city. And I have a lot of writers friends who are very, very talented, but struggle to find, okay, what is the next step for me as I step out of film school, to find even the right entry job, other than like office PA and stuff like that, because there are no writers rooms readily available for people to get into, to start doing coverage for scripts and things like that in production cities. So that's always a little bit more difficult. So it's about breaking down what area of the industry you want to be in, because there's also the commercial and there's a commercial and music video world, right? So all of that stuff is also depending on what the location that you're in, because the music scene in Atlanta is very strong. Like, it's extremely huge hip hop and rappers and stuff like that. So a lot of like the successful production companies that is like entrepreneur that of small businesses that are made, they do a lot of work with big rappers, big hip hop artists here. And those people get to work above the line, and that's also a pathway to go towards the other thing. So it's really about how you break down what type of areas that you want to go in. Because if you want to work in crew and work like day playing jobs, like if you're a G&E, if you want to do you know, PA jobs and work your way up there, then Atlanta is a great place to be, because their jobs are office PA and PA here all the time. And so, because like the majority of the production is happening in Atlanta, so the opportunities present itself, and like the differences of cities also come in to. When I was in Boston, it was very much like it was harder to find a community that you can work with, because personalities is so big in this industry, right? And so if you have a sparse amount of people to work with, it's harder to get things done, and make sure that you find the partners and the people that you are compatible with. But if like now, if I walk around Atlanta, I can throw a rock and probably hit an actor. You know what I mean? Like, the actors everywhere, and casting is easy. You know, because there are hungry people. There are people where the jobs are. So the smart choice and the smart answer to your question is yes, you should go to where the cities are, like Atlanta, like New York, like LA, for sure, because opportunities present itself, and I do believe that competition breeds growth. So if you go to the right place, it just allowed you to have more opportunities to learn and meet with people who are further in your craft than you are, for you to get that opportunity from. So as much as I want to say that yes, you can, you know, be anywhere and make things happen anywhere, the cities do help a lot. Just from my personal experience of I would hear, you know, production in Boston every now and then, every far in between. Like there were, at the time when I was doing videography, there would be like 3 videographers that we know, right? Like, and that's really it. Like around Boston, there's that scene, there's that 3 guys that we know. But when it comes to Atlanta, they're swarming everywhere, right? And so those are the elements that you want to be surrounded by, for both your personal growth in your craft and also the opportunities that you're going to get.
When you relocated to Atlanta to pursue this, did you have like a network there already, or did you just kind of go in?
No, I did not. Well, I knew a couple of people, but none of them were like in the film industry. So most of my connection kind of breeds from film school. Yeah.
Since like I know like you've done a lot of projects, and most of them I've seen like, you know, writer, producer, director, editor, like how do you think you've managed like multitasking, and was it like difficult, or did you find it like easy?
Yes, well, the answer to that is don't do what I do. That's stupid. That it's very stupid what I because I came from a one-man band type of thing when I was doing videography, right? So it was a transition into, because you're so used to doing everything on your own, so you kind of have to do that when you don't have the resources. But it's so much smarter for you to get the right team and delegate, and understanding how to collaborate and work in tandem with other creatives. In those projects, I did it because it's like, you know, circumstances, and it's a transition that I have to go through to do those things. But and not to say that you can't do that, but and it does help me, you know, as a director and producer. I think knowing how to edit, knowing how to shoot, doing all those things helped me communicate with the people that I work with better. But as far as like, well, I'm trying to like never edit again. I don't want to edit ever again. It's something that I'm trying to work out of, because as you also start building your portfolio and your in my case, a company, right? On the company level, if you try to build a company without a business model that serves a very specific purpose in the market, you're gonna break your back in terms of figuring out workflow for each of those part of the production, like pre-production, production, and post-production, right? Like that's gonna break your back in so many ways, and also break your operating expenses, because you have to build a system with equipment, with computers, and everything to facilitate that when you don't have the capital or the resources or the knowledge to do that, really. And so unless you know, you have to figure out how you present yourself to a market. So and for your own personal self, you know, you don't, the first thing is you don't want to be a master of none. You want to be very good at what you do, because everything in this industry and how you network and get jobs is that you present yourself as a problem solver. If you solve problem for people, people will call you for jobs. Like the way that I call people for jobs now is I remember how they solved my problem the last time, right? If you come to set, if you edit something, or if you do anything for any production, if you make something easier for whoever that hires you, they're going to call you again. They're going to remember you and call you. A lot of the jobs are word of mouth, right? Now we do have a lot of like online resources for job finding, but also it's really about who would they remember first when they are looking for this job, because people will go out of their way to save time, because nobody wants trust me when I say nobody wants to go on Facebook and post like looking for this person, and then you have to go through the whole process of getting to know them, interviewing them, and making sure that they're the right person for the job. Everybody wants to be able to scroll through their contact and hit call and have their problem solved. So when you do that, having a skill set, and having a skill set is specific to solving a certain problem, you will get more jobs. Don't do what I do. I just, that was like me, that was my learning progress to see what I am good at and what I want to do. And also like, you know, training your craft with knowing, you know, each of each part of the production process. But I never want to do that again. Like that's crazy.
I guess creating that all on your own versus creating like your own production company. What do you think was like the harder obstacle to really overcome? Like kind of like freelancing and like making little projects as you go, kind of like living off of that for a little bit, or like creating your entire brand? And
yeah, I mean, all of those above, right? I don't have a one specific, like the hardest thing in the world, but I'll sum it up in an answer like this, because as a freelancer, and if you want to build your own brand and own your own company, there are a couple of things. As a freelancer, let me answer the first question. As a freelancer, the two things that you're going to have to deal with in terms of pressure number one is that the income is unstable, right? Like you're going to wake up a couple of days where you work on a couple of projects and you feel like, yeah, I just got paid for what I do and it's going to feel fucking amazing. And then you're going to be able to take on the world. And then you go on 3 weeks without work, right? And then you like, oh man, like you wake up and you're like, oh man, maybe this is not it for me. So the pressure that you deal with is that, okay, first you need to deal with like the very self-motivation of training your craft and continue to grow as a freelancer and as an artist, but you also in the same time deal with the lack of freedom of financial freedom. So with those two pressure come into place, it's very difficult to manage that, right? And so freelancing is not for everybody. And I actually don't say that in a way that's like being a freelancer is the best thing possible, right? Because it's not. Sometimes the best way for you to do it is to stabilize yourself and doing a PA gig to climb yourself that way and network that way. It works better for some people. For me, I chose to be a freelancer and build my own company because I would be a terrible office PA because I'm too opinionated. And I'm too, strong-headed to be in those positions. And for me, me discovering film later in my life, I didn't always know that I want to do film, right? I like shortcuts, so I'm trying to figure out the best shortcuts way to go around the system as much as possible. And I don't know if I'm going to be successful or not. Like I don't know that. I'm figuring that out myself. But as far as like, it just what fits your personality, right? Because I work with people who try freelancing, but it's not the system that works for them. And it's also another thing is you don't want any choice you make, because a lot of the choices that people make right now, they feel like it's permanent. It's not. You could always work in the industry as a PA and as like any entry job for a couple of years and like get the experience, learn from big corporations and take that back into your freelance gigs, right? Because at that time you eliminate the financial freedom elements because you have saved up for a decent amount of time. Then you have choices. You get a freedom to make your choices on the creative side a little bit more, right? So that's a tough thing as a freelancer because you have to balance those two pressure, and those two pressure is usually with both of them coming in your head. It's very emotional. It's difficult, right? And then you work 6 days a week, and then you have no time for your family, and then all of that like life balancing that we learn in our 20s, it's a lot to handle. And so when you get a job in the industry, you eliminate one of those pressure and be able to work at one thing at a time. So it goes from person to person. And as far as like the business side of it goes, that's like the tricky part because you're starting to have to learn how to manage payroll, manage taxes, manage finance. How do you operate your expenses, your investments? And so like, I spent a few months in the pandemic to read like how to manage finance books, and those are things that I did not think that I would visit after film school. You know what I mean? Like it's not something that I thought that I would want to do, but it's part of the job. And so you kind of have to take a step back from creativity and to do entrepreneurship things for as a business and building a brand. And so a lot of the things I do are mistakes. Like it's just that I just kind of like, okay, well, I don't know how to do this. How do I do this? And I do it, and I make mistakes, and I find out how to not do it, right? And so to your question, it's all of the above. It's all of the above, and everybody's going to have a little bit of a different path to that. You just have to determine what's right for you at this time of your life.
So especially in those like super pressure filled times when you were like freelancing and kind of like living from gig to gig, how to take care of yourself. Like, what was your ritual of self-care in those times? Just, you know.
Yeah. Here's the thing, to answer that question is that I don't know. I really don't. I think that's something that I'm still trying to figure that out myself, because it comes from self-care, and like mental health is like a conversation that's obviously we're having nowadays, right? Like, I think that's not something that we've always pay attention to, and be sensitive to listen to what your body and your mind needs is something that we're all learning at this stage of our lives. Like, I think the question, like the question of mental health become mainstream in probably the last, I don't know, 5 years, maybe, but before that, not really, right? And so, and also where I come from, Vietnam, I grew up in Vietnam, like mental health is not really a thing, you know what I mean? Like, we just like, hey, suck up and move on. So it's still something that I'm balancing out, because sometimes it is suck up and like, be strong and be able to put yourself through, because pain is needed for growth. So you need to go through pain to it's like, going to the gym, right? Like, you need to put your muscle through a certain amount of pain for it to expand. So it's the same thing for your brain and your durability and your perseverance, right? And so the answer is, how far do you want to push yourself, right? And how far do you and also the managing of, because passion for me breeds productivity. If I'm not passionate, if I'm not excited about something, it's very hard for you to work hard. So you want to avoid burnouts, right? And so if you work yourself to a point of burnout, your productivity goes down. Therefore, it affects everything else that you do. So as far as like self-care goes, I don't have any sort of methods to solve my problems. It's more so of like, I try to be very sensitive to asking myself of what I need, and be as fair as possible to what is needed to be done, and what's needed to, like, what can wait, right? Because sometimes, like, we put certain deadlines and certain pressures on ourselves, but sometimes, like, it's all math, right? How I break it down is, it's all math for me, because that's how I kind of be able to rationalize these decision-making processes. That if you work a certain amount of hours, your productivity and your decision-making ability goes down. Because if you work above, like, the 12th hour, you start to make wrong decisions. Like, your edit is probably not going to be as good. You probably get a little short when you talk to clients, right? And so, mathematically speaking, you just have to break it down in a way that, okay, set very realistic deadlines and realistic expectation with the people that you work with. Be very clear and communicate, and so that you can have your space and have your boundaries, and be able to deliver things, and also still fulfill your work ethic, but also not let that affect your productivity and your own well-being. That's the kind of the best advice that I could give, because I just watch everybody else around me have a different way to approach to things. Because sometimes I deal with stress by different ways that work for me, but don't work for other people. Like, sometimes, like, the way that I relieve stress is sometimes like, okay, I pull in a 20 hours day and get it all done, and just like rest for like 3 days, right? And that's not healthy. So I don't want to give that advice to anybody, but it's something that works for me sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't. I guess the last thing that I want to leave with that question is, with filmmaking specifically, let me put it that way. With filmmaking specifically, it is really important for you to make sure that the creativity and the excitement in your brain is being fostered in the best environment possible. And what I mean by that is, do other things other than filmmaking. I start to get better, honestly, recently, by reminding myself of what I used to enjoy, like whether that's like playing guitar, playing poker, playing sports, and do like hiking, travel, any of those things, right? Like, make time for those things, because those live experiences breathe what is going to be very important for your job. Because if you forget to experience life, you can't take that back to your job, because filmmaking breeds so much creativity that you need to make sure that is fostered. So that's how I justify it, of like, okay, because you're always going to run into like, oh, I mean, when I'm doing this, I should be working, right? But if in my brain, I'm trying to justify it by like, okay, all these things are going to be helpful for my job, because if I feel good, if I have a healthy system, it will be better for the end product overall. And the person that I actually got this advice from is the guy named Chris Do. I don't know if you guys know who it is. He's like an entrepreneur. He used to be a graphic designer, and now he turned into an educational entrepreneur. And what he said is that it's better to build a good system rather than setting goals, because sometimes goals add a lot of pressure and expectation, and you're gonna damage your confidence when your goals are not met. And those things happen in life, and it's hard to control that. But if you foster the right environment, a right system for you to reach your goals, that's more important. How you build that system is you minimize the damage of like mistakes that you make, because mistakes happen. And if you can manage that to not let the mistakes get you down, then that will help you in the long run. And so, because I used to be so goal oriented, like I need to reach this by this date, I need to reach this by that date. And while it is helpful at certain times, but what it gives is a very imbalanced workflow of like, whether you're going to put so much of yourself, you can have extreme high where you're like, oh, I can do everything, I can reach this goal, I feel so fucking great. And then you're going to have moments of low where you don't hit your goals, and you're going to start to feel like, oh yeah, like, oh man, maybe this is not the right thing for me. You're going to need a lot more emotional support. But if you build a system where you don't have the extreme highs and lows, too much fluctuations, then you can kind of deal with that better as far as like self-care goes. Yeah. So that's like the best way that I can explain how I deal with that. And I don't have a perfect system. I'm still working on that, but I think having the right, philosophy in your mind is probably the best way, because because like people would tell me to do yoga. I'm too restless to do yoga. Like I can't fucking do that. That's ridiculous to me. You know, I would sit in my room and try to do yoga, try to listen to an app called Calm. It just doesn't work for me. Like I'm too restless. I'm going to think about something else. And so some things work for certain people and some things don't, you know? So I think it's always comes down to the philosophy, and your action is just follow that philosophy and like that moral compass, and you'll be able to manage it accordingly.
I really like how you say that you can't like relax by doing yoga, because I'm a very type A person. I feel like I'm always very like you said, I'm most of the time goal oriented, so I'm kind of chasing that high a lot of the time. Like creative work, and it can burn you out really fast. So I definitely understand what you're saying, and how your Vietnamese background kind of ties into that as well. I thought that was really interesting, and how it's like this hustle, rise and grind culture. It's just for like creatives specifically, because you can't burn yourself out like that, because you're not going to leave room for breeding creativity. And you said, I really like the whole system idea, like in that first instead of putting goals like above that. That's just it's too hard on yourself sometimes, you know. You gotta like loosen up. But I really like advice. That's really, really solid advice, especially for somebody that's feeling burnout, even just from like working a service industry job in the pandemic.
100%.
Little things like even just human interactions making me burn
human interaction. 100%. You just have to figure out a system that works for you. And I do highly recommend whoever that's listening to look up Chris Do. Is Chris, and then his last name is Do. He gives really fantastic advice that I have, and he breaks down in very much like effective. He has very effective breakdown of how to achieve certain things and how to build these systems. And a lot of his advices I have applied in my life, and I have found them to be extremely useful. And like honestly, like if you reach out to him, he'll probably come on the podcast.
Ooh, That's good to know.
Yeah.
Is he like he's just a speaker, or is this like a TED Talk or something? One of those?
Yeah, I mean, he's done a lot of those. He actually, if you search him on YouTube, he has like a channel called The Future. It's like an educational platform where he teaches like basically entrepreneur freelancers to how to deal with clients, how to talk to clients, how to negotiate prices, how to manage your workflow, and what are the philosophy that you should approach for your companies, and how does it work, and how do you present yourself. So it's a lot of the useful information that, even though a lot of the stuff that he does is very effective for graphic designers and designers overall, UI UX design. But I have applied a lot of that philosophy into filmmaking, and it helps me a lot as far as like a creator and as a freelancer overall. So yeah, I highly recommend looking him up. I think it would be a good help for everybody.
We'll slide into his DMs or something.
Yeah.
Right. No, yeah, I think all this talk of like you saying you're still mastering, like, you know, what's good for you and like what's not, and all your projects and everything. And then especially like the mistakes, you know, you said you have to make mistakes sometimes to know like what's right or wrong. So I'm like kind of interested like about that. So I just wanted to hear like what was the most difficult project that, you know, that you had that was like difficult to execute, and like kind of why, and if you liked it at the end or not.
There's a short answer to your question is I like every project by the end of it. Like there's always a way that you love to find a way to love the project by the end of it, and what it teaches you. As far as the most difficult project goes, I think it was probably my thesis film project. That was probably because I went kind of balls to walls with that project, and we tried to accomplish a lot of things. It was like a 40-minute short film, and it had animals, it had the miners, it had action, it had stunts, it had driving, it had all of those elements that I should have been smarter about of what I could accomplish at the time. And so I aimed really high for that project, and I think my ambition also pushed the team very far beyond their limits. And so we learned a lot from like what our limits were, and what we could accomplish, and how to do filmmaking with simplicity, but and accomplish more, right? Like I think with that project, I think I went really high and I fell short. I feel I'm very proud of it. I'm very proud of the project and what we've been able to accomplish. And I learned so much from doing that. And it teaches me how to deal with a lot of those, things. But with the budget that we had as students at the time, it messed us up a lot. And that is when you kind of cross the line between health and good, emotional being, with toxic work behavior. So that was the project that I think it made it very difficult, because I was obviously like, because with filmmaking you spend so much time with the people that you work with. On production is like 12 to 14 hours a day, and then pre-production is like 24/7. You call each other after a certain amount of past bedtime. So it's a lot of those things, and managing and understanding boundaries and communication of understanding that conflicts are necessary, and how do you manage conflicts is a big thing, right? And so that project teaches us a lot about how to manage all of those things, and that's what I kind of took away from that. But it was very, very difficult because we aim a little too high, and then we had a lot of conflicts, but we all came out stronger. So we don't regret it. It's just that it was very difficult, and obviously when you look back in hindsight, how would you do it differently? There's always ways that you can be better.
I know it sounds cheesy saying that, like everything kind of happens for a reason. It's all kind of like a learning curve,
Yeah.
when you're trying to figure out your own wheelhouse and what you can handle yourself creatively.
Right.
it's you're trying to balance it out, but you also don't want to give up a dream at the same time.
Yeah, 100%.
I feel like filmmakers they have this there's like this longing or like yearning feeling about like just achieving the utmost success when it comes to producing films, and just like the whole film industry in general is just so commercialized and so prominent in everybody's culture. Like everybody's talking about movies, everybody's talking about TV and stuff like that. So being able to like put yourself in that world, I feel like you have to have that ambition in a way. But again, you're gonna run into situations where you're being tested constantly.
Yeah,
And
100%.
like, I feel like it's very much like a trial and error lifestyle, and you just have to be prepared for that.
Yeah, and like as filmmaking, you gotta live on the unsafe area a little bit. Like you have to try things. You have to make things that you make mistakes, that you are gonna fail and you're gonna fall short of, in order for you to get that growing pain, and grow with the people that you want to grow with. I think that's very big. So yeah, and you have to make things that you're uncertain of, that makes you nervous. Because unless you don't, if you make things, especially when you're a student, and when you're learning, when you're a learner, when you're a student of the craft, which you will always be, but at the beginning, I think that is when you have like, because right now, after working in the industry for a couple of years, I would take another 3 months as a student any day of the week, because you don't realize how much time you used to have and how much free resources that you used to have with like free labor of the students that you have around you. You can make just about fucking anything, and make those without like that pressure of like, okay, is this going to pay? Is this going to sell? Is this going to distribute anywhere? All of those questions you don't have to ask as much as a student, and you'll be able to foster your creativity in the best way possible. So like make weird shit, like go bonkers, go balls to walls and see what happens, right? Just make sure that you have certain philosophy that you can follow back to, of like things that you would not allow yourself to do, to yourself and to the people around you. I think is big. Like never, like conflicts happen, but never attack each other's character, right? I think that's big, right? I think being able to recognize the difference between personality and behavior, because personality is something that belongs to people, but behavior is something that you can that you can adjust, right? Things that you can have. Work ethic is something that you can train, but a personality is like, okay, this person is a joker, like that person communicates in this way and that way. Like I think those are things that you want to. The reason why I said determine the differences between personality and behavior is the same thing with determining what is a mistake and what is something that somebody is doing to you personally, right? Because a lot of times when you're in conflict, it feels like a lot of things, when people let you down or not doing something, you take it personal. But most of the time, those are necessary mistakes that you make while in conflict, right? And conflict breeds creativity as well. So you just need to be able to not take what people do personally too much, because when that happens, you start stepping into the realm of this is not about the project anymore, and it's about egos. It's about because we all have egos. Let's fucking face it. Like, we all have egos. So just to make sure that you manage that as well as possible, and you're going to make mistakes, but I think that's the main thing. To have the philosophies that you don't break and you don't do. Have these sets of values that don't let you carry too far to the other side, if you will.
God, yeah, you couldn't have said it better. I mean, there's so much to it, and conflict, like you said, definitely is going to breed all of it. So like, it's an interesting thing. I mean, like we're still learning and we have yet to enter the space, but even just hearing about it is just, it helps so much with like what we're about to expect, basically going into the film industry and the potential of it all. Just even getting to hear so much from you was great today, but I would just love to like wrap up things on a light note.
Okay.
What was like, besides Bo Burnham, like we were talking about earlier, what was like a recent filmmaker that has inspired you that you've seen?
As far as like directors go, the people, I have certain people that I love what they're doing with their careers, and I think I love their voice in the industry. Right now I'm in love with Taika Waititi. I think a lot of his work is, I think his way of storytelling, like Jojo Rabbit, I think is a brilliant piece of filmmaking. And I think it's a brilliant piece between like telling a story from a very taking a subject matter that is extremely difficult and turn that into a lighthearted but emotionally charming film that has depth and history and layers is something that's so hard to do. And his way, like you can see where his inspiration is coming from, but also what he is able to do. And now his career, he does like his older films were like The Hunt for the Wilder People, What We Do in the Shadows, and how we can see him transfer that into like doing Thor Ragnarok and like directing the Mandalorian episodes. I just think a lot of things that he's doing is extremely creative, and it seems like everything that he does make it feel like it's a playground of filmmaking, and sometimes I think we forget that. And so I love a lot of the work that he does, and I think that it really speaks to me in a way that I want to be able to visually tell stories in the way that he does. And I think that he's just an incredibly smart guy in general, and he doesn't take himself too seriously. I think as far as like a producer go, like Jon Favreau is somebody that like it's just like leading person in the industry, and he's so extremely talented and a jack of all trade, and just like propelling the industry forward. And I just like love what he's doing. As far as like some of the other filmmakers that I really enjoy that is like more new is that is newer, Greta Gerwig. I love Lady Bird and what she's able to do with her career. I just love what she's been able to do, and I've always been a fan of Edgar Wright, which is another he's British, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, he's British, and he just makes films that are so unique, and it's so his, and it's like feels like a playground, right? But as far as like recently, like during the pandemic, I loved Schitt's Creek, and that's like I don't know if you guys are familiar with the show. Schitt's Creek was written by Daniel Levy and what's his dad's name? Eugene Levy. You guys familiar?
Familiar with the show. I think I watched like the first few episodes, and I just didn't get into it, and everybody's like,
no, I get that.
Whole first season, and I'm like, oh, but it's one of those shows. So it's like, you gotta come, I guess.
You don't have to. I mean, it hits everybody differently, but what I love about the show is that because there's so many different types of filmmaking, and that's a type of filmmaking that you eliminate anything that's like, I'm not saying this is not a diss to the people that made that show on a technical level, but that's a type of shows that I think you eliminate everything that's like stopping you from telling stories, like, you know, great cinematography, great, you know, all the technical thing, crazy setup. It's just four people in a town, and it's all comes down to writing, right? And it's so heartwarming, and it's touching, and it's like very uplifting and well spirited. And it just makes everybody's days better when you watch that show. You know, it's one of those type of shows that you like when you feel anxiety and you feel tired, you just kind of want to rewatch to just like chill so that you can relax, right? So that's also a medium of storytelling that I think is very effective. And sometimes like we focus on so much on the technical side of things that it stops us from being able to make stories that like we create so many barriers for ourselves. So that's a show that I fell in love with. So I love that show. Like that's a show that kind of defined the pandemic for me, because I could have binge watched the whole thing.
I love that, because like you said, it's very character driven in that sense, like the writing, and that's like the side of film that I'm really interested in. And I love how I haven't even watched a lot of the show, but I know who Maura is as a person.
Yeah, Moira.
I know David, like Eric David. Like I don't even watch it, but I know. So that's just like showing the strength of the show right there, basically.
Right. Yeah. Not that you have to, but I do. The show does get a lot better. The show does go in an upward trajectory. Like I think by the last two seasons, I just like bawl out crying every season finale. It's extremely touching by the end of it, because at the first season you kind of watch a bunch of like obnoxious rich people putting into like a shitty town, right? Which they're also Canadian, so it's like it's like the comedy doesn't always like land right away. But I think that if you do have time and if you kind of give it another shot, I think if by like end of season 2, if you don't like it, then that's it. But if uh, but uh, but if you do continue, I feel like there's a good chance that you may, because it's a very well spirited show. It just makes you feel so good, and it gets really charming, and it handles a lot of um, identity and a lot of conversations and about representation in a very, I think, subtle, effective, heartwarming, and truthful way, which I think a lot of films now have a tough time doing. So I feel like that's what I would say about that show.
Well, thanks for the suggestion. Maybe I'll dive back into it.
Yeah,
Also, just thank you so much for sharing all of this great insight that you have with your history in the industry and everything. This has been a
for
great
sure.
yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much. Especially because I've only been in like kind of this major for like a year and a half.
Yeah.
So now I'm like kind of worried experience wise because this is my first internship. So now I'm just looking for advice and stuff pretty much just as I'm gonna graduate this December. So
When do you graduate this December?
yeah.
And you said you want to be an editor?
Yeah, that's like kind of the path I want to go.
Okay. Why do you say kinda?
Because I did start off like wanting to get into like film production behind the scenes, but now I took
Okay.
like an editing class this summer. So now I'm
Okay.
like kind of like looking at both my options, you know?
Uh-huh. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay. If you don't want to deal with too much people, go in editing. If you want, if you like people, then go into film production. Because because you're always going to have to deal with a lot of people in film production. With editing, you minimize that as much as possible. You still have to deal with a lot in post for sure, but
Yeah.
it's definitely less. But yeah. So I hope that you can find the right path and be able to figure out what you want to do.
Thanks so much. Definitely appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there any place on the internet that you want to like plug? Like, where can we keep updates on you and everything that we can like watch you, stalk you?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, as far as like Instagram, I'm at Tang Films. That's where I probably share most like updates of what we do. The latest film that I produced is currently in Tribeca, is available actually online on Indeed.com/Rising Voices. So if you search Rising Voices film, it'll come up because it was like on Variety and whatnot. So it's very it's actually a program. Rising Voices was the program that gives voice to filmmakers of colors, basically spearheaded by Lena Waithe. I don't know if you know who she is. She was in like Master of None and like The Shy and whatnot. So she kind of basically created a program creating these opportunities for filmmakers of colors, and they create these like beautiful 10 short films that screened at Tribeca, I think a couple of days ago, that is now available online, and that everybody can go watch it. And other than that, we have like our channel on YouTube that's like Hoka Films, that we like post all of our narrative short films on there. So you'll be able to find a lot of like the projects that we made as students on there as well. But other than that, yeah, I don't have anything specifically right now that I'm plugging. But other than that, yeah, that'll be it.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, Tang. And
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. So again, we're gonna have awesome people like Tang in the future on Have a Map, and we hope to hear you guys next time. All right. Bye.
Great.